Augustine has said that without love, there is no hope. Without hope, there is no love. And you can have neither hope nor love without faith. Now, faith is the thing that we're going to be focusing on this morning, but it seems like such an obscure and even kind of an abstract thing. It seems strange and distant and hard to reach, but really that's not the case at all. This idea that faith is something that is believed in that has no evidence for it. It's kind of a critic's version of it. So that, you believe in something that there's no proof for it. But it's simply not the case. We have faith in things all the time that always prove themselves out to us. The seats that we sit on, the cars that we drive, the house that we live in. We have faith in them because they have spent time proving themselves out to us. Well, God is no different. God has proven himself to us, and that is true faith. It is a commitment, a belief in something or someone, and we know that it's backed up by evidence of what that is. And we've placed our faith in all kinds of things. Some things it is for an ill return. If you remember back in the 90s, the craze about Beanie Babies, right? I mean, it was nuts. Things were crazy, and they were flying off the shelves, and people were charging outrageous amount of money for these things. And one guy, he had it figured out. He says, I know what I'll do. He says, I'm going to collect them, and I'm going to get all that I can, and at some point later in the future, I'll sell them all and pay for my college tuition with them. And so he spent the next several years, all of his resources, all of his money and time, he spent into collecting these Beanie Babies until he spent over $100,000 on over 15,000 of these Beanie Babies. And then if you're around, you know what happened. The bottom fell out of it. Nobody wanted them anymore. They were old news. And he's stuck with all these Beanie Babies and nothing to do with them. Sometimes we place our faith in the wrong things that have not proven themselves to be right or to be true. And so that we'll see this morning as we continue in John's Gospel, in chapter 4. If you will join me there, we're going to look at verse 43 through the end of that chapter in verse 54. Jesus has spent the last couple of days teaching the Samaritans that he has met there in Sychar, that he has brought them into the family of God, and he's been teaching them, and they've just been hanging on his every word. And so we're going to pick up from that place right there. So if you will join me there, beginning in verse 43. After the 2 days, he departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen that all he had done in Jerusalem and at the feast. For they too had gone to the feast. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. And when this man had heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went there and asked him to come down and to heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. The official said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour which he began to get better, and they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. The father knew the hours when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. And he himself believed in all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea into Galilee. Jesus had left the area of Judea, headed back towards Galilee that he had been months before the Passover feast. He's returning there. He had found a very warm reception and even a very fertile ground there in Samaria. He didn't face the opposition from the Jewish leaders. He didn't have the contention and the critique that he had been around his own Jewish people, but now he moved back into the area of Galilee away from Samaria because he has more work to do. He has more divine appointments to keep, and we will see that very clearly in the people that he meets here. The Samaritans had believed based upon the testimony of the woman at the well and upon Jesus' very own words. The Jews, rather, had demanded signs and miracles, and they wanted to see more. They wanted to see their so-called tricks, if you will. Show us something. But he arrives in Galilee, interestingly, and he gets a really pretty warm reception there. They seem to celebrate his coming. They seem to welcome him there. But there's a reason for it. Because they had welcomed him because they had seen what he had done in Jerusalem. They had seen him perform signs and wonders and miracles there in Jerusalem during the Passover. And in fact, if you want to hold your place and turn back to chapter 2, verses 23 and following, it reads, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them, because he knew all the people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man." Jesus had indeed done miracles and performed signs there at the Passover, and people had seen it and they had believed. But what did they believe? That he was a miracle worker? That he was a magician, a trickster, a sleight of hand, an illusionist? Or did they truly believe he was the Son of God? And we see the evidence that some of the people that had been there meet him again there in Galilee. And they're like, "Hey, there's this guy. We saw him before. You got to come. You got to see him." That's the reason Jesus did not entrust himself to them. Why he would not give himself over, because he knew what was in their hearts. He knew what they were really after and what they truly believed. It was not the truth in what he was about and what he was doing there. It seems the people in Galilee were anticipating more tricks. Where Jesus turns and he goes to Cana. And if you remember Cana, this is where he had been at the wedding and his mom was there. Hey, they've run out of wine. So he takes the 6 jars and he turns them from water into wine. It was an incredible miracle. And instead of believing him and who he is because of that miracle, they still question. They still have more things they want to know. But he's back in this place again. And he meets a man from Capernaum. He's an official there. Don't know whether he's Jew, Gentile, or much about him. Perhaps he was in the service of King Herod. But he's an official there, and what the key thing about him is that his son is very sick. In fact, his son is dying. So he's in bad shape, and he has heard that this Jesus, this guy who's performed all these miracles before, perhaps he was aware of the wine from water. Perhaps he heard about the things happening at the Passover. Regardless, I've got to find him. He is desperate. He is out of means and measures to correct the situation. I've got to find this Jesus. And you can almost understand it and sense the desperation what it was. But people are still looking for miracles. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we're never satisfied. There's always something newer, something bigger, something faster, something shinier. Advertisers bank on that. And then they take that to the bank. They convinced us not to be satisfied with what we have, to always want more, always want better, always want newer. And they make their living based upon that. And yet these people too are never satisfied. They always want to see more. Capernaum, which was about 16 miles away, just northeast of where he was in Cana, this is where this man comes from. And when this man finds Jesus, he asks him to heal his son because he's at the point of death. You can just sense the fear of losing his son in this man's voice as he's asking Jesus, just probably begging him, just do something for him. Come with me. And Jesus says, in his response to the man and his son dying, he says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Now let's put this in clear perspective here. Unless you. Now the word for you here in the original language is plural. So in the South, he's saying, unless y'all see signs and wonders, you're never going to believe. You don't get the truth. You're not understanding what you're seeing. And even though I've proven myself to you, you always got to see something else. There's always got to be one more trick, one more instance, one more sign, one more miracle. And then we will believe. God has proven himself. And we ask that question, God, prove yourself again. Show me one more time. And folks, every breath and every heartbeat, God proves himself again. God proves that he is real, that he is in control of life. And so we have that every moment of every day that God proves himself. And we have to look at the world around him. He rebukes the Galileans for missing what's really going on. Rather than realize that God is standing there in the midst of them, they're looking for some kind of a show. Imagine this for a moment. There's a fellow and he has a job and he's working, but he goes to the boss one day and he says, you know what? He says, I'm going to admit to you, he says, I haven't been doing my best work. I've been kind of slacking off, and the work I put out has been kind of shoddy and really lacking in quality, and I haven't been really producing what I should be producing. So I've really been kind of a lackluster, subpar employee. But here's the reason why. It's because you haven't given me a promotion. If you give me a promotion, I'll show you what kind of employee I can be. I'll show you I can put out the best work. I can put out more than anybody else. I'll be a great employee, but you've got to give me a promotion first. Now, how many of you would that make sense to you? Nobody. In fact, that guy's probably going to be looking for a job in the very near future. But isn't that the point? We go to God and says, God, if you bless my unbelief, if you'll bless my lack of faith, then I'll do something for you, God. We go to God all the time saying, God, if there was just one more thing you would do in my life, then I would fix it. I would make things right with you, God. I would actually engage in ministry and kingdom work, God. We act very much like that employee who soon should be looking for another job. And we take the prime approach. God, if you would just make things right in my life one time, then I would engage once and for all. Kind of backwards, just like this employee. Their attitudes, that attitude, represents the deepest state of unbelief. An incredible state of unbelief that unless I can see it over and over again with my eyes and not realizing the truth that's right in front of me, such a state of faithless life. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says we walk by faith and not by sight. And Hebrews chapter 11 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. In fact, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and he rewards those who seek him. Let's say that again. Without faith, you will never please God. It is contingent upon our existence and belief and walk as believers. That we have faith in God, true faith, not some small and logic-based faith, but a faith in who he is and the reality of it. The man is undeterred by Jesus' words and his rebuke there. He says, sir, you've got to come before my child dies. He's becoming, I think, even more emotional and more desperate. He says, you've got to do something. Time is short. He's dying. And we've got a long walk. We're talking 5 or 6 hours back, just at a normal walking pace to get back to Capernaum. If we leave now, we might make it. You've got to come. And Jesus simply says, go, your son will live. Jesus, despite the unbelief, despite the lack of faith, despite the misgivings about it, Jesus is still compassionate. He is still caring. He has sympathy. And he understands the plight of his father. And he heals the man's son regardless. He's performed another miracle. And it says the man believes him. It says he believes his word, but what did he believe? Is he like those in Jerusalem at the Passover that said they believed, but Jesus wouldn't trust himself because they didn't believe truly in who he was? Or is it more than that? Does he think he's just another miracle worker, maybe a prophet, or does he understand that the Messiah has just healed his son? Now, what happens here, it doesn't just say it plainly, but if you look and read between the lines, he doesn't immediately go home. In fact, he stays the night. Now, at the time of day it would have been a little dangerous to make that travel back, but I'm telling you, if I'm that concerned, I'm not worried about it. I'm taking off. I'm going home. I'm going to check on the son. I'm going to make sure he's okay. I'm going to see what's happened. But he doesn't. He stays the night there in Cana. And the next morning he leaves. He's going back down. He's making that journey back to his hometown. His servants are looking for him. They've headed towards him. Hey, the son is well. He's fine. He's good. Everything's great. And so there's probably this joy, this excitement over the son being well. And so the dad begins to think, well, wait a minute. Exactly when did this happen? When did he get well? When did this happen? And he said, it was yesterday about the 7th hour. The fever finally left him. He's good. He's great. Everything's fine. And the dad thinks back. It was yesterday at 1 o'clock. I was talking to Jesus. And Jesus says, go, your son will live. He connected the dots. He put the pieces together. He understood what had just happened there. He really finally got it, it seems. As he travels on home from here and what he's doing, we see this during this trip that is a real act of faith and a real belief in him and what he is. It is for faith that this man believes. But it is, faith seems like this phenomenon. It seems like, again, this abstract and obscure thing that's hard to grab hold of, the thing that's hard to put our hands on and wrap our minds around, this faith thing. But actually, if you think about when we're children, our parents teach us what? Stay away from strangers, right? Stranger danger, don't talk to them, don't go near them, stay away from the strangers because you just don't know them. They could be a wonderful, friendly person, very giving person, very caring person, or they could mean ill towards us. We simply don't know because they're a stranger. And we say, just because you don't know, every stranger is dangerous unless you know better. So treat them all that way. It makes perfect sense. We don't know if we can trust that person. We don't know if we can have confidence because the person hasn't proven himself or herself to us. So stay away from strangers. Here's where I think the problem lies. Faith is so difficult because God is a stranger to us. We simply don't know him. We can't trust him because we haven't invested. We haven't spent the time. Remember chapter 11, verse 6 of Hebrews I read earlier? The reward comes to those who seek him. Our relationship with God extends no further than the hour on Sunday morning. Spend time in his word, spend time in prayer, meditating on who he is. We don't trust him. We don't have faith because we don't know him, because he is a stranger to us. It is not the relationship that God had intended for us to have with him. He meant for it to be close, tight-knit, walking side by side with him. And we simply can't trust him because we completely don't know him. The validation he gets about the boy's recovery just explodes his faith. God has proven himself to this man. This is the second of the two signs, that Jesus performed there in Cana. The first being the water to wine. It's not the first two miracles, but the first two there in Cana. The water to wine proves that Jesus is not bound by time. He didn't have to wait for grapes to grow. He didn't wait for them to ferment. It was just like this. Instantaneously, water becomes wine. So he's not bound by that. He shows that he has control over nature. With this, he shows that he's not bound by space. That he cures somebody by remote, if you will. He's in another city 16 miles away, and Jesus cures him. So he also shows that he has power over our human bodies. Now, interestingly, both of these are private miracles that took place. Took place with the servants there who were getting the wine ready for them, and only the servants were aware of what was going on. This was a private thing with that family. And the first ones to come with the news, again, are the servants. I think there's an interesting place here of what's going on. Regardless of what happens, he and his entire family truly believe. They truly believe. It is a miracle of God. Real faith is not a blind leap off some theological cliff. That's not ever what it was meant to be. God shows us who he is. Authentic faith is an informed belief about Jesus Christ. That was the official's response. It wasn't simply just a blind faith. Jesus proved himself to this man. And because of that, the man's faith has grown from it. Faith that never asks you to check your intelligence at the door. It is not that. It is not just a dumb way of existence. It is not for the feeble-minded. It is actually for the strong. Those who are in Christ, those who truly and completely understand who he is. This is the reason that John gives us these signs. Remember, he set up from the very beginning to prove to us that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ, the Son of God. That's the point of this entire gospel account, to prove to us who he is, and these signs are that evidence of it. In 1980, during the Boston Marathon, it was won by a lady in record time. I mean, she blew away all the other times that had ever been posted for the marathon. It was incredible. And she celebrated as anybody would be as winning the marathon and setting a new record for it. Pretty quickly after she won the marathon, the questions began to come up. Because honestly, she'd never run a marathon in near that time before. And she really didn't have the build for a real marathon runner. And she got to the end and she's not really that sweaty and she's not really that winded. And as questions began to get asked, she can't really recount a lot of the things that were happening along the path there. And then witnesses began to come forward. And things began to die down pretty quickly because people had seen her at the beginning of the race, but nobody had ever seen her throughout the race. Nobody had been passed by this lady. So what had happened was that she started off the race, but then she left the race. She went and got on the subway, rode the subway across town, went back to the crowd, jumped back in the race in front of everyone else, and then ran across the finish line. So about a week after she won this marathon, it was stripped away from her, given to the people who had actually earned it, the people who had actually worked for it, the people who had actually invested in it and given everything to this marathon to try to run it and try to win it. They're the ones that should have gotten the credit for it. They're the ones that should have gotten the glory for it, not the one who just sat back and rode her way through life. It says God will never be pleased unless we have faith. We can't expect that at some point we started this thing off and then we can just ride our way along until the end of this life and that somehow God would be pleased with our faithless existence. That somehow we're going to stand before him, God, I just wrote it out. I didn't really do anything, but somehow I expect you're going to be pleased by it, right? I'm afraid we're going to be disappointed on that day. We can't simply just write it out. Our faith is an active thing, not something that we can talk about that happened years ago. If I ask you if you were married here this morning, how do you know you're married? Well, you might say, I remember the ceremony. And there were people there. There was a preacher there. There were flowers and attendance to it. There were probably gifts, and there were pictures taken and video even maybe. So all these things. But okay, that's the past. How do you know you're married? Well, I've got this ring that I wear every day, and it shows me that I'm married. So that's, okay, we're still talking about something that happened a long time ago. Today, how do you know that you're married? It's because you have a relationship with someone else, right? It's an ongoing relationship, a spouse that every morning perhaps you get up with, and then throughout the day perhaps you talk to that person, and then at the end of the day you're back together again, and you go to bed at night, and you wake up again next morning and you start all over again. It's about a relationship that I can tell you about each and every day about being married. Because those memories can fade away. Those pictures could be destroyed. The flowers have certainly faded by now. I could even lose the ring on my finger. I would still be married. And so we ask about faith. Well, tell me about your faith. Well, I was 10 years old. I walked down the aisle and I filled out a card, and it was great. It was fun. It was a wonderful experience. No, I mean today. Well, then they took me, and then I was baptized, and that was a great thing. No, today. Tell me about your faith today. And too many of us can't. We can't. Nothing's going on today. Nothing's happened in the last week. Nothing has changed because I'm simply not living that way. There is no relationship. For me, God is a stranger, and I don't know him. And that's a scary thing. For us, it has to be not something we focused on that happened years or even decades ago, but what's happening right now in our lives to show our faith, to show who we are. With Jesus, we don't look back at a past experience. We live our faith every day in what we do and by what we say. And so we have to wonder, is our relationship with Jesus, is our admiration or our draw to Jesus, is it really faith, or is it simply a spiritual curiosity like the people there in Galilee? Am I simply just wanting to see the show? Am I wanting to be a part of it? Or am I truly living life with him? Do I have faith in him because I know him and I know who he is? Or is he yet a stranger to me because I've never spent any real time with him and understanding truly what he expects of me?